Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. On behalf of the easecon Ministry of Education, I'd like to welcome all of you to another session, another interview on the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. My name is Krishna Prem Rupadas, and we have with us today His Grace Nitai Prabhu from easecon London. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Prabhu.
Prabhu. Hari Bol, Prabhuji. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Nitai Prabhu got in touch with Krishna consciousness in the late 90s, originally from America, joined easecon London about 20 years ago, and has been serving there in many different capacities. Lived as a brahmachari for 10 years, later on got married, today married, and served, also still serving as a temple president for the last 14 years. Probably is also the zonal supervisor, the UK, and yeah, despite of all his managerial responsibilities, he still manages somehow or other to read Srila Prabhupada's books regularly, also teaching, giving courses and classes. So I thought that would be nice and very interesting for us to hear from you about your realizations on reading Srila Prabhupada's books.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Maybe we can start. You could maybe share with our viewers how you first got in touch with Srila Prabhupada's books. What was the first book? How did you receive it, and how did it change your life?
Very nice. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you again for inviting me to share. I would say it's a great inspiration of mine, Srila Prabhupada's books. And yeah, your question, how did I first get in touch? Well, it just so happens that actually my first contact with the books was my first contact also with devotees. So I was around 16 years old and in America, in the United States. And of course, being a young 16-year-old, I was a little bit spiritually minded or inclined, but was still also very much inspired by partying and a lot of rock and roll. So I was actually at a Lollapalooza concert in America. And I was approached as I was entering the event by a book distributor. Of course, I didn't know he was dressed in a hat and stuff. He just came up to me and said, "Would you like a book on spiritual life?" And I was probably already quite elevated in certain ways. And I said, well, yeah, okay, but I'm a little busy now. And then he opened the book and we had a little bit of back and forth. And then he opened the book and he showed this picture of the changing bodies, the transmigration of the soul. And I don't know what happened, but as soon as I saw that picture, something struck me. And I remember thinking specifically, this is the truth. And I grabbed the book out of his hand. Wow. And I just was looking at that picture and I said, yes, I'll take the book. And then he said, would you like to give a donation? And I said, no. And he said, well, we're trying to get everyone to give a little. And I said, but you're trying to give me the book. Now you want me to get, and we had a little bit of a haggle. Eventually I gave him some Lakshmi and some money. And he gave me 3 books: Easy Journey to Other Planets, Perfection of Yoga, and I think a Bhagavad Gita. And so I went away, and the Bhagavad Gita, I just couldn't access it all. But the Easy Journey to Other Planets I found very amazing, mainly because it was kind of scientifically based and seemed to explain things in a certain way. And interestingly enough, I wound up using that book in my senior year at high school. In English, we had to write a dissertation paper. And my dissertation paper was called Proving the Eternal Validity of the Soul. So that was because I was kind of a little spiritually minded, and I used a bunch of different things, but I remember using Srila Prabhupada's book for that dissertation paper. So that was kind of my introduction to Srila Prabhupada's books and also to the movement. But it took me another 7 years, even though over the course of the next 7 years, I met devotees and got lots of different books as I moved from America to England, to London. But I never joined. I never kind of really went to the temple or got involved until around 1998, something like that.
So, and afterwards, I mean, Bhagavad Gita later on you started to read, and what made you join then finally? What made you join?
Well, ironically, it wasn't the books that kind of made me join, in a sense. Although I've met many devotees since who I'm always amazed when they come in and they've gotten like a Bhagavad Gita or a Bhagavatam 1:1 on the street, and they said, I read this book and I want to join. And I'm like, wow, the books work, you know. It actually is amazing. But for me, I guess I was a little bit more covered. I remember, interestingly enough, I had a copy of the Krishna book 1:1 with this beautiful picture of the Astasakis on the front. And I remember I used to take that book off the shelf and look at it and hold it and think, what is this? You know, who is this? And then only later when I joined did I realize Prabhupada kind of says that in the introduction of the book, that people will look at the front of this book and think, who is this? And I thought, wow, I used to do that. Bhagavad Gita, I used to try to read, but I really had no access into it. I found it very difficult with the Sanskrit, then the transliteralization, then the English in bold, then the English in, smaller typeface, or not bold typeface. Somehow I would read it, but I just couldn't get anything out of it. But then what happened is my best friend at the time, he and his wife, they became devotees, and he started kind of preaching to me and encouraging me, and we used to have really, really long debates. He would come over for an evening, we would have something to eat, and then we would sit up until like 3 or 4 in the morning debating. And I was always speculating on ideas of spirituality, but he would always quote the Bhagavad Gita. Well, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita it says, and I was like, why you always quote the same book? You know, you have to be more variegated, you know, have to be open to lots of different things. And he says, but this book makes so much sense. So eventually he invited me to the temple. And after a few different experiences, then I started to come regularly, and I eventually started chanting. And then I remember I had once I started coming, I had the Bhagavad Gita, and I used to look at it and think, I really want to read this. But I read Science of Self-Realization first after I started coming. And then I remember the day I picked up the Bhagavad Gita, and I thought, okay, I'm going to start this huge book. I don't know how I'm ever going to get through it or what's going to happen. And then I just started reading, and somehow, I guess through the association of the devotees also, and the fact that I was chanting and starting to, I guess, purify my life a little bit, then somehow I gained a little bit of access. Although after the first couple of times I read it, I really thought that, you know, Krishna was wrong and Arjuna was right. That I thought, no, we want peace, man. Arjuna should leave the battlefield. Why should he fight? Who is this Krishna, you know? But, you know, after time and association with devotees, you begin to understand the deeper spiritual meanings and essences like that.
Great, thanks for sharing. So later on, you became a brahmachari, and you also were distributing books for many years.
Actually, sorry, Prabhu, to interrupt, but on that point, before I even moved into the temple, one of my visits was on a Saturday to the temple in the morning. And I was introduced to a very dear friend. His name is Radharaman Prabhu, and he's still my mentor and very close confidant and friend. And he said, oh, what are you doing today? And I said, well, I don't have any plans. And he said, why don't you come with us? And I said, where are you going? And he said, we're going out to Guildford, a small town outside of London. And I said, oh, okay, what are you going to do? And he said, we're going to distribute books. And I said, oh, okay, then. so I went with him. And I remember I looked at all the books and I thought, well, I haven't really read many of them. The only one I could relate to was Chant and Be Happy with George Harrison, because I was also a bit of a musician. So I just started trying to distribute books. And I think I was out for a whole day, almost 8 hours on my first day out. At that point, I don't even think I may have started chanting. But I forget, distributed maybe 4 or 5 books, something like that. But that was in 2000 or 99, probably. That was in 99. And then by 2002, 2003, I was doing full-time book distribution. And I think at one point I was even like the top book distributor in Europe, but it was a short-lived situation. And then eventually I kind of became more required for management, and it wasn't long after that. Around then I got initiated and then became vice president, and then eventually. But I still distribute books. Every year during the marathon, I go out at least for some time, join the devotees on book tables and distribute on the street. I really love it. I think in my opinion, it's the safest place to be. As long as you make sure that the book goes in the hand, the Lakshmi goes in the bag and gets turned in, all the decisions are okay. And management, it's a nightmare, but with book distribution, it's so nice making that first contact with people. So, and I also encourage lots of devotees to sponsor books as part of our Shastradhan program here in London. So, yeah, and like that, yeah, love distributing books.
Now, after those many years you're practicing, how do you see the relationship between actually understanding the books, reading them, and distributing them? Like the importance of course, there is importance of preaching. We want to spread the message. At the same time, we also need to absorb ourselves. Where do you see the relationship between those two?
Yeah. So I guess, it's obvious that if we don't, evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyat manamapana, if we don't absorb our consciousness with spiritual topic matter, then we obviously won't have the strength to conquer over the mind and the senses, which are perpetually trying to drag us in so many different directions. And Srila Prabhupada's books, actually, I was just listening this morning while dressing the deities to some narration of the Bhagavatam, which I'm trying to do regularly. From the moment I get up in the morning, I'm trying to hear Bhagavatam. At the moment, I'm listening to the audio books of Krishna Dharma, Prabhu and Chintamani Dham, Mataji. They have these beautiful books where they've created more of a narration and a story from the Bhagavatam called Brilliant as the Sun. And I really love it. It really, because they add and they decorate so much, they fill out so much, and they really make the storyline come alive, while at the same time interjecting the words of the acharyas and Srila Prabhupada's purport. So I really find it inspiring. And this morning I was listening to the fourth canto, and I heard more or less the whole pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, and just thinking about Dhruva Maharaj's determination and the interaction between King Uttanapad and his wife, and the brother was Uttama, right? And Uttama, and the way he interacted with Suruchi and Suruchi, and and Suniti. And just thinking about how so many aspects of this can be applied in our lives, and if we're not conscientious, Uttanapad was a little bit not really paying attention to the possible reactions, and how we make mistakes. We can make many mistakes. Even Dhruva Maharaj, once he got the darshan of the Lord, he was really feeling that, really repentant that he had come to burden the Lord with some material desire, and he was feeling bad. And then when the Lord told him what was going to happen to his stepmother, he was feeling very repentant that he's caused this and that he's created this awkward situation. And meanwhile, Uttanapad is repenting, and it's just wonderful to be absorbed and hear the pastimes and glorification of the Lord and the Lord's devotees, to help us understand how we can try to implement these things in our lives, to be a little bit more conscientious, a little bit more conscious, as Prabhupada said, first be conscious, then be Krishna conscious, how we can act. So every page of the Bhagavatam has lessons that can be learned and implemented into our practical life, whether you're a manager or just a family person or a sannyasi or whatever your position is in our society or in society in general, there's a lot that can be learned from, especially the Bhagavatam and of course the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling on. Prabhu, please forgive me.
No, thank you. It shows how you're absorbed, and I think that's the essence that if we want to preach, we need to hear. What can we say if we don't listen? So I think that's a very relevant point. And also, what I found inspiring, of course, myself also being a temple president, seeing you. You running easecon Soho. That this is like a serious project. It's like a very important temple, and you're also some supervisor, so there's a lot of responsibilities, but still somehow or other you manage to give that focus at that time for reading. And how you do that? What is your secret?
Well, I think it's really important to share, Krishna Prema Rupa Prabhu, that there have been plenty of times when it hasn't been working. So I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'm hoping in the future that won't happen again. But somehow it's easy for reading to get relegated and become a sort of secondary or optional item in the practice of our devotional service. When I took initiation, I gave vows to chant 16 rounds every day. So beyond the shadow of a doubt, that kind of gets done one way or another. And of course, following the principles, but somehow there wasn't really a verbal commitment to reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So I guess it's easy to get relegated, and also sometimes I feel like reading is sense gratification. So it's like we don't engage in sense gratification. I know it's spiritual sense, but it's sort of like somehow it gets lost. And actually, I would say that because of that, I and my service has greatly suffered because of it. When you lose touch with reading and hearing from Srila Prabhupada directly in his books, and associating with our founder Acharya and associating with the pure devotee, then something in our spiritual life gets lost. And the illusory energy is so powerful that we don't notice it at first. Also, we don't notice it, and that's really unfortunate. But once you start to reconnect and hear and read, then you start to see the difference, and you realize, wow, how much I was in illusion by not making time for this every day. So I would say, with the help of my wife, especially, she's very solid devotee. Also, I'm very, very honored and privileged and grateful to have such a good wife. She's very inspired. She started a thing with one of her mentorship groups, where she called it a reading challenge. So they agreed to read 1 or 2 pages every day, just a page or two, and of a specific book. And then they created a WhatsApp group with whoever was reading, and they would share like one reflection each on the group. So she started this, and she started to find that it was a great way to encourage others to read. And so we decided, well, we should have our own reading challenge. So we decided to start reading the Bhagavatam, and we did it on, and we thought, well, let's share this with others also. So we opened it up on Facebook, and then the temple leaders and communications team, they thought, oh, this is a great way to promote reading. So we started this thing called Bhagavatam Bites. And so we read for about 20 or 30 minutes, 3 times a week. It goes out. And this is on the easecon London Facebook page. And we started literally almost about a week ago. It was 1 year that we started. And we're already in the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, I think 6th or 7th canto, just by reading a half an hour 3 times a week. And we've got a few people who've started to follow regularly and comment. Many people asking questions, and tuning in and appreciating. And we try to make it fun. Of course, whenever we can get outside, we just take the book with us and a camera. And you know, we've done readings in Regent's Park. We do readings in Hyde Park. We do readings. We've even sometimes, when it was warm in the summer, even during lockdown, they were allowing us to go out on those paddle boats. So we went out on the paddle boat with our books, and we just set it up. We did it there. You know, we've done it. We just try to let everyone see that you can read Bhagavatam anywhere. Don't forget to take it with you, because no day is complete unless you do some reading. So her and I are doing that regularly. And we also started a reading challenge with our Grihastha mentorship group. We don't force everyone to join in, but we make it a voluntary thing, and we set up a different reading group. And so we always have about 10 from our group who join in. And last year we started also around May time. We read Nectar of Instruction, just reading 4 pages a day. Now this we read every day, 4 pages, and we reflect back on the WhatsApp group. So everyone shares a little reflection, which is great because it also creates community around reading the books, even though we're not reading them together exactly, but we're reading together and reflecting and sharing back things. And then sometimes we comment, oh, that's a great reflection. I hadn't thought about that. So it's really nice. And so reading 4 pages a day, we finished Nectar of Instruction, Nectar of Devotion, and Science of Self-Realization last year, which many of the Grihasthas were like, oh my God, I haven't read this much ever. And everyone's really seeing just by reading 4 pages a day. Of course, this is Vaisheshika Prabhu's, you know, exceptional inspiration because of this. Be a sage page by page, just, you know, you know, invoking and encouraging people to read. And then we have, so now we're reading Your Ever Well-Wisher because it's Prabhupada's 125th centennial year. And so devotees are just like getting really inspired by reading about Srila Prabhupada's life as well. So anyway, so in this way, anyway, every day some reading is going on, and I feel enlivened, and that's the thing. You feel like you're getting the juice. And the days when it's, sometimes it gets busy and we have to skip, but we always make it up the next day. So just like if somehow you don't get all 16 in one day, you got to make them up the next day. So but for the most part, every day there's some reading going on. I'm also reading Shiv Ramaraj's book, Sankalpa Kaumudi. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that yet, Prabhu.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot recommend this book enough. It is, I mean, Shiv Ramaraj is such an exalted personality, but this book is really out of this world. It's the moonbeam of determination, Sankalpa Kaumudi, and it's all about how we have to be determined in our spiritual life if we want to make it to the platform of Baba. You know, if we want to progress through the stages of our spiritual life, then we have to be determined. And a very important part of that, of course, is the chanting, but being attentive in our chanting and being attentive in all of the aspects of our spiritual life, but also reading and hearing about Krishna, absorbing ourselves in the Bhagavatam. It's vitally important. So I'm getting a lot of inspiration from that at the moment also. So again, just rambling on. You got to stop me. You got to just say, Jai, just stop it. Okay.
There's a lot of nectar is coming out, so we relish. No, I think it's a wonderful point that actually sometimes for devotees it seems to be, oh, this book, so many books, and I don't have time, but actually just a little reading and just do it regularly. And I think what you highlighted very beautifully with sharing all the wonderful project that you have there, and which I really always love to be in touch with you and with easecon London, because you're always some step ahead of everyone else. Like, it's like amazing to hear what you're doing there. But from what we understand, it because devotees, they encourage each other, because you're doing it together and you're doing small steps, it becomes all of a sudden, it becomes possible, you know, and everyone can join. And that's basically what we also trying to promote with this whole project, Books Are the Basis. Just trying to encourage devotees, just take a book, read, and do it every day. And, you know, in this way, your spiritual life will be different because we are depending on Shravanam Kirtanam. It's so important. Prabhu, you also mentioned about associating with the Prabhupada directly. And of course, we know that famous statement that Prabhupada said that he will live forever in his books.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that? How we meet Prabhupada there when we read, and how we can understand Prabhupada better through that?
Well, I can honestly say that for me, there is no greater inspiration of someone currently with us who's helped me to understand and see that more than His Holiness Keshava Bharati Maharaj. And he, I was very fortunate some years ago in 2007 to spend about 4 months with him. In an awkward situation for him. His health wasn't so good, and I got the opportunity to serve him. And I got to see how absorbed every day he was in hearing Srila Prabhupada. Every day we would listen to chronological lectures of Srila Prabhupada, which was brilliant. And that's another thing, to hear from Srila Prabhupada and his lectures. Of course, I know this is books are the basis, but we're talking about the author. And so his when we were hearing chronologically, a morning walk conversation. Then you would hear Bhagavatam class he would give on the same day. Then a room conversation he would give. Then maybe an afternoon or evening lecture, and then some other conversation. And you start to just really, Prabhupada comes alive. You just realize, because sometimes I think it's easy for an image of Prabhupada as just I guess, the founder Acharya, just to sit there. But the amount of things that he was doing and activities he was partaking in, meanwhile he's translating the books, meanwhile he's giving discourses and lectures, he's interacting and guiding his disciples. I mean, it's so brilliant. But in that time with Keshava Bharati Maharaj, I mean, he really inspired in me how important it is to read Srila Prabhupada's books, because we are personally associating with Srila Prabhupada. And as you said, Srila Prabhupada will live forever in his books. And so that is our access. And if we think about it, I mean, Srila Prabhupada came to the West only when he had those first three volumes of the first canto. So he brought the Bhagavatam with him. I mean, he could have brought the Bhagavad Gita, he could have brought anything, but he brought the Bhagavatam with him. He invested so much of himself. As he said, he put everything that we need to be sufficiently God realized, even in the first canto. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't read the entire Bhagavatam, though, but everything is there in the first canto. So I think that, Srila Prabhupada is there, and the more that we hear and chant and read specifically his books, the more that we associate directly with him, the more that we become inspired to act according to his instruction, and the more that we become aligned with his vision and his determination and Krishna consciousness. So I don't know if that's enough, but yeah. Plus, Keshava Bharati Maharaj, I don't know if you're aware, but he's been reading every day, 40 pages a day for, I think, the last 4 years. And online, he also does this on Facebook. And he's read all the way through Bhagavatam once, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and now I think he's doing Brihad Bhagavatamrita. And he himself personally, I think, has read through the Bhagavatam at least twice since he started doing that, 40 pages a day religiously, as long as his health permits. And I mean, what an inspiration for such a senior person to be setting the example. That just, and I've been with him and spoken to him, and he's like, everything's there in Prabhupada's books. This whole idea we need to go and search for something higher or look for, Prabhupada's giving us everything in his books. So yeah. Anyway, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Yeah. What would you think if all the easecon devotees would actually start doing this, like reading every day, let's say for an hour? How would easecon change? What do you think? What would be the...
Oh, you mean they're not? God, I missed one. Well, I think, I mean, it's hard to say. I don't really wish to speculate, but I think you said it earlier, and I was also referring to it, that when we read regularly, we transform. We transform. Our consciousness transforms. Our mode of conduct transforms. We become more sensitive and more sensitized. We naturally, obviously, become, because we're becoming more Krishna conscious, we become more open, and we become better instruments to be used in Krishna service by Krishna directly, to be moved and like a puppet shuffled around in Krishna's hands. So I'm sure that if everyone was reading regularly and getting absorbed, then, we would easily be able to push the movement forward more.
More strongly.
We would also probably have a lot better relationships. Anyway, I was thinking about something similar to that this morning while hearing Dhruva Maharaj's pastimes, that it's just like, we really have to value the relationships. Just from hearing that pastime, I was thinking that King Uttanapad, he was kind of under the thumb of his wife in a sense. And because of that, he was attached to her. So he was attached to, and he neglected his other son. But then when Narada Muni came to see him, he explained, in the future, Dhruva, he's an advanced devotee. He's gonna do wonderful things. He's going to make your lineage exalted. He's gonna exalt your name. Otherwise, who would know Uttanapad? Nobody. But because of Dhruva Maharaj, Uttanapad became glorified. And it's like that. We don't think always about who we're dealing with right in front of us and who they might be or who they'll be in the future, and treating them with the respect and dignity that they deserve as a devotee. So there's lots of challenges and issues that could be resolved just if we become more Krishna conscious ourselves, And I can admit, I have made numerous mistakes like this, and I'm just trying to absorb myself in a way that, I can pray that I don't make those same mistakes again, because I know what it's to be in bad consciousness is really easy, and you still think you're in good consciousness. So.
I think this leads us towards maybe one of the final questions. How can we make sure to apply what we read? We absorb all this knowledge, we're hearing, but then what can we do to make sure that we apply it? Any suggestions on that?
Well, this is a really good question, actually, and it's not always so easy. What was it Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said about Haridas Thakur, prachar and achar. So it's easier to speak nice philosophy, but to, the prachar, but the achar, to live it is not always so easy. And I would say that, of course, Prabhupada also was very clear that we're meant to be Goshiyanandis, not Bhajananandis. So although sometimes I think it'd be really nice to just lock myself in a room and just read and hear and chant. But because we engage in devotional service, the more that we absorb ourselves in reading and hearing, then Krishna will arrange circumstances, if we're sincere and serious and honest, then we'll start to see how Krishna is arranging scenarios for us to get purified, to implement the teachings in the book, to try to understand more deeply, and to apply these things. The association of devotees is very purifying, and devotees always give us the opportunity for trying to apply the teachings. I think preaching or teaching, as we know, you learn more when you teach than you do when you sit in the audience and are taught to. So if we have to teach, that also means it forces us to try to understand and comprehend the concepts a little more. And being in management, I also like, as I'm reading, to see how what I'm reading about can be practically applied in what I'm doing in my life and my service, in my role as a manager, leader, because there's so many lessons there. So I think that same principle of sankalpa, determination, that we have to read with the intent of trying to learn and understand how I can apply this. Otherwise, it's just like we're reading some novel and we put it on the shelf and we get on with it, you know. Anyway, those are a few thoughts, but I don't know if I have a real practical answer.
Wonderful, man. I think this brings us to an end of this interview.
No. What about you, Prabhu? Tell me, I want to hear from you.
No, I play a different role here.
Oh, I
But,
see. Okay.
maybe you have some final words, some last words, concluding word you like to share with us before we stop.
Wow, you really put me on the spot there. That wasn't one of the questions. I guess I'd just like to say thank you specifically and personally for your dedication and determination and devotional service, taking up so much responsibility for so many years. Also, being such a good example yourself. And I know, having had some personal association with you, I'm always wanting more of that association. That you've really taken reading Srila Prabhupada's book seriously yourself. I appreciate the fact that you're part of this team who is trying to encourage everyone in our society to be more serious about making Srila Prabhupada's books the basis and the foundation of our movement and the foundation of their lives. And because somehow it was Prabhupada's books that brought me in one sense, my first contact. So I'm really into distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and I'm really into reading Srila Prabhupada's books and teaching Srila Prabhupada's books, and also trying to make them accessible. To that extent, I do have a course. Our London College of Vedic Studies has a course on Udemy, introducing the Bhagavad Gita to newcomers, and I try to really demystify it in one sense so people can gain access more easily. I think sometimes we drop a lot of the bombs in the hands, but we don't have the follow-up to help them gain entry. And I think if we could create a space where there's a more accessible entry level for new people, we could also make the books more relevant for new people. And the more that we talk about the books, the more that we read the books, the more that we share the books with new people, the more that they'll be inspired to dive into them. So anyway, those are my concluding words. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
Honored to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Nitai, Prabhu. I think it was very, very inspiring. And by your own example, you show how enthusiastic we can become while absorbing in Prabhupada's books. Thank you so much.
Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai, Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.